Hello, my name is Oscar and Fire, and I'm pretty sure the slap of the book on my thigh was really audible just as I started introducing that, and we're going to try again. Hello, my name is Oscar and Fire, and we're going to be doing something. I was going to say something different, but I'm actually going to do something I did a few months ago, which is a book review. Because as you may recall correctly, the last time I did this, which was 2 videos ago, which was several months ago, I decided to review the Fall of Shannara series. Because when I finished reading it, I was immensely disappointed, and figured that, you know what, I'm just gonna talk about it and express my disappointment, my utter complete disappointment in the Fall of Shannara. And then it hit me, you know what? It's been a very long time since I've read any other book series in the Shannara series, outside of Defenders, obviously, because Defenders immediately preceded it. So I decided to go to Barnes & Noble's website and buy The Sword of Shannara. Because the last time I read this book, it's kind of reflective with the ring light. You can clearly see the ring light when you get certain angles. Look at that ring. But yeah, I decided to buy The Sword of Shannara because the last time I read The Sword of Shannara, I was like 12. I was literally 12. I had just finished reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And my mother recommended that I read these. She had copies of her own, but they're like literally like first editions, not first, but probably like second editions of the books, and they're very old and very brittle. She still has them too. They're very old, brittle versions of the books, so it's like I'm not going to read them because they will absolutely fall apart at this point. But yeah, I decided to buy my own copy of The Sword of Shannara and decided to read it. And my goodness, this thing is a dense tome. I forgot how long it was. I remember it was long. I remember it was super long. It's 726 pages in this copy. But yeah. And I have to say right now, I reminded all over again of why I actually fell in love with this series. And I guess I should kind of, okay, I guess I should break it down. So first things first, as I was reading it, it maybe got to what is it, the first third? Yeah, a little bit less than the first, a little bit less than the first half actually. A little bit short of the first half of the book. I thought was actually not boring, but not very interesting. It is a super derivative book because, as anyone can tell you, The Sword of Shannara is extremely derivative of The Lord of the Rings. Terry Brooks writing this book borrows so many ideas and concepts from The Lord of the Rings that it practically just kind of slaps you across the face. And I think it's deeply amusing. And I noticed it. It was very obvious from the outset that The Sword of Shannara is extremely derivative of The Lord of the Rings. And it is throughout the entire length of the book, too. But at the same time, the first half is notable for 2 reasons. It's notable, for one, because it very much feels like someone's first novel. It feels a lot like someone's first novel. In fact, it very much reminded me of this book, Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad M. Brooks, the proprietor of the Shadiversity channel and Game Nights on YouTube. Because I read this last year for the first time. I think he published it 2 years ago, something like that. Yeah, 2 years ago. I was actually completely right. Holy crap! But yeah, I read the Shadow of the Conqueror 2 years. Last year. After my mother bought it for me for my birthday or something like that. And I enjoyed it. But it definitely felt like someone's first novel. It had all sorts of weird little writing tics and habits that veteran writers just don't do. Just weird ways of framing things and conversations and perspective that don't really you don't expect someone who's good at writing to actually put them in there. And The Sword of Shannara is full of that. You can go there. You go there. You'll be in the background. It's all good. But yeah, so the Sword of Shannara feels, first of all, like very much like someone's first novel, and it is. But also is just super, super derivative of the Lord of the Rings. And you can see it from everything, basically. You know, the Skull Bearers are the Ring Wraiths. Balinor is Aragorn. Alanon is clearly, is clearly a version of Gandalf. The Northland is clearly a version of Mordor. I'm trying to think. There's so many different things. Cullhaven, Cullhaven is kind of like Rivendell. Not a clear and direct like one for one comparison, but it's very much like Rivendell because it's the first respite of the journey, and then in a lot of ways Storlock is like Lothlorien, albeit not as impactful. The Kingdom of Californ is clearly Gondor. Even in like Tircis, there's the mystic Stenman who is influencing Palance Buchanan to, into madness, and that's clearly just Wormtongue infiltrating Rohan. And the madness of Palance Buchanan is clearly like the madness of Denethor in Minas Tirith. The final battle is so much like the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and the list goes on and on and on. The Hall of Kings is clearly the Mines of Moria, from a narrative perspective. It occurs. How'd you know it occurs? Okay, it occurs in a slightly different narrative place. It occurs after Storlock. But yeah, and you just keep going and just keep finding all these little things that you could compare between Lord of the Rings and the Sword of Shannara, and it's clear like just borrowed ideas and storytelling and so forth. And this is really obvious in the first half of the book. The entire quest to Paranor to retrieve the Sword of Shannara is very much that. And even then, though, there's still like little ideas. There's still like little unique ideas in the beginning of the novel. First of all, it's really ham-fisted because it talks about the Great Wars, and it's really funny because I didn't remember that this book talked about the Great Wars or World War III. If we're being, if we take it, if you take that to its logical conclusion, you don't realize that I didn't realize that when I was a kid. I thought the Great Wars were probably just some great medieval war or whatever. I didn't realize it was actually World War III, even though, and I did remember this from my original reading of the book. The party finds an old city. It finds like an old modern city with, like old buildings, twisted steel girders in the middle of the Wolf's Tag Mountains, and it's funny. I remember that distinctly, and I just thought it was interesting because I didn't really make the connection that the Great Wars might be World War III. Probably because I was too young. I really was too young at 12 to really be thinking about that sort of thing. But like, there's a lot of independent ideas in here. Like you also have like the Hades horn being introduced for the first time. I am 100% certain that notification just dinged. I couldn't hear it, but I'm absolutely certain it's audible in the recording. It's staying though, including this comment on that notification ding. But like things like that, like they appear in this novel, but the Sword of Shannara still gets dragged down though, I think, by this derivativeness. And it isn't until the second half of the book that I think the Sword of Shannara kind of starts to come into its own, because that's when Terry Brooks starts to do his own things more. He starts to break away from the sort of Lord of the Rings-ish narrative and starts to do more things that are like what his later books would start being like. For example, Shay being completely broken off from the rest of the party and meeting up with Keltset and Panamon Creel. For example, I completely forgot that Panamon Creel and Keltset were a thing. I totally forgot about that. But I thought that was interesting. I thought it was because it wasn't a fellowship dynamic. It was a whole new dynamic that was actually unique to Terry Brooks's universe. to a story. You know, there's not really a direct analog to it. I mean, there's Oral Fane in there, who's very much a golem-like creature, but you know, he goes out of his way to in that plot to kind of, like, for example, like, make it so that the trolls aren't just seen as mindless beasts or anything, but are actually their own people, their own race, with their own culture and their own values and their own governments and their own settlements. You know, they aren't just the mindless monsters that are attacking Tircis, you know, in the other plot, but they actually are like their own independent people. They're not just orcs or anything. You know, and I thought that was actually really interesting. And I also would say that you know, because there's like basically the story kind of breaks up after the Quest to Paranor. But there's kind of two A plots, Shay and, well, okay, that's not quite accurate. It's more like Shay is an A plot. Okay, it's really hard to describe this because there's multiple plots, because the party really splits up and Terry follows them all. He follows them all to varying extents. So the main plot, I would say, is Shay with Panamon, Creel, and Keltset traveling into the Northland. And then I guess it's a series of 3, I wouldn't even say like B plots, because they're all of equal importance. Because all 4 plots are really of equal importance. It's just to what degree, and what degree do they intersect. Because then, of course, there's Flick and Alanon continuing the search for Shay. There's Minnie and Leah's side adventure, and then there's Balinor and the rest, and their attempt to protect Tircis from the invading Northland army. And I thought they were all interesting. I thought the different ways in which these different stories were handled, taking advantage of each unique character's strengths and weaknesses to kind of like work on that, to kind of work each individual story in interesting ways, was a really great touch. And it really speaks to the kind of writer that Terry Brooks would become later on in his career. And I would actually say my favorite is Minnie and Leah's side adventure, where he accidentally saves Cheryl Ravenlock and saves the population of Kern purely through boldness and ingenuity. You know, what he lacks in wisdom and broader intelligence, he makes up for in courage and out-of-the-box thinking. And I really love that. And I also love the sort of naturalness, even though it's a very minor subplot, I love the sort of naturalness of Minnie and Leah's romance with Cheryl Ravenlock. I really thought that was neat. And I think that for most of his book series, Terry Brooks does a really good job with romantic subplots. He's not too obvious or too blunt with them. You know, he weaves them in very effectively, and you get emotionally invested in them. You know, I think that he fails miserably with both Defenders and the Fall of Shannara when it comes to romance, because it's so clumsy. And he also something he doesn't do in most of the series is put much or any emphasis on sex. But he does that in Defenders and the Fall, and I can see, and that's part of the reason I think they kind of flop, because there's less emphasis put on the emotional value and more just put on the physical value, and that weakens the overall storytelling. But not so in the Sword of Shannara. In the Sword of Shannara, there's barely anything there. The most they kind of do is just kind of like hug and everything, and it's a lot sweeter. It's sweet, and it works very well. But I like it. I like all the various plots, though. I like how Flick has to infiltrate the Northland army, and then inadvertently ends up not inadvertently, but because he makes a deliberate choice to do so. But he finds the courage to save the Elven King Eventine. Or I like how Balinor is trying to save the city of Tircis, and it kind of goes awry because he's a little reckless about it, and his propensity to kind of like be straightforward about everything just ends up getting him captured. But I also like how Terry Brooks spends a little time like just kind of delving into the madness of Palance Bacana. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was a nice change. It's not just he's mad. There's a reason he's mad, and then furthermore, there's a further reason he's mad when you find out he's actually been slowly being driven. He's slowly been driven mad through the use of like some sort of drug or something. I just thought that was all rather interesting and neat. And like I said, the whole Shay and Panama Creole thing was actually very, very well done as well, because it's a whole new dynamic. He's with a couple of characters that you don't know if he doesn't know if he can trust, and it creates an interesting dynamic where he has to kind of learn to trust this thief and this enigmatic troll to try and retrieve the sword of Shannara, which keeps just barely evading his grasp every single time. And that leads to the end when Shay finally defeats the Warlock Lord, obviously Sauron. I'm not gonna lie, even though I think someone could see it as kind of cheap, I like the idea on a more on a philosophical level that the Warlock Lord was defeated by the truth. Because personally, I am a great advocate of knowing the truth, of the truth being more important than anything. And I'm not saying that that I've never lied, or that I don't deceive people, or even that I don't admit that I engage in lies of omission or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that the truth is still important, to know the truth of whatever. And I thought that was an interesting twist, that the sword of Shannara is a tool for revealing the truth. That theoretically it could be used as a sword, but it's really more important for revealing the reality of a person's, of what a person is, or who a person is at their very core. And I thought that defeating the Warlock Lord that way at least was different. It wasn't just, destroy the Ring of Power or defeat him through force of arms, but to show him that what he really is nothing at all. But yeah. So I'll tell you right. But yeah. So words are escaping me. Man, so I'll tell you right now though. Yeah, Sword of Shannara, really good book, really, really interesting book. I liked it. Like I said, I thought that the first half of the book was a little bit uninspired, but it was good enough to keep me reading, and that is just fine by me. And yeah, not only would I highly recommend it, it is definitely a very strong first outing of 40-year-old book series, basically. And the good news is that now that the Sword of Shannara is done, look what I bought. Can you kind of, yeah, now you can. Oh gosh, ring light. Okay, so that's the first king. I got the Elf Stones, got the Wish Song, and I got the first king of Shannara. They are up next. I know that there's like a version of the original trilogy in a single volume, but it actually, technically speaking, is more expensive than buying the book separately. So it's just one of those. Okay, I guess I'll just buy them separately because it's cheaper, and I want them separated anyway. I don't want them in a whole volume. I have the Lord of the Rings in a whole volume, and well, I love it. I love it. It's at the same time, I'd sometimes wish I had like the books separately instead, just because it feels a little better in the hands than having a huge tome. But yeah, so I'll be reading the Elfstones of Shannara next, and then I'll be back with a video on that to talk about that. And I expect to enjoy it as much. If I enjoyed the Sword of Shannara as much as I enjoyed it as a kid, which I feel like I did, I feel like I'm going to enjoy Elfstone. Stop sliding off that pile, good lord. I feel like I'm going to enjoy the Elfstones as much as I enjoyed the sword. Just because it's. I remember distinctly really liking the Elfstones of Shannara. I don't know what it was precisely, but there was something about it that there was just something about the. Please stop sliding off my Okay, that I really enjoyed and adored, and I think I'll have that experience again. So I want to thank you for watching, and yeah, be sure to check out. I think I have the links. I think I have the link in the description there, maybe, if I remember to do it. But make sure you check out my Twitch channel. That's where I've been doing the majority of my content creation on the internet over the past 6 months. And I'll catch you next time, probably when this is done. But I'm also slowly getting back to work on my videos for the Final Fantasy 14 playlist, selections playlist. So you may see Penitus, the theme of the Praetorium, upload on here sooner rather than later. Yeah, so I'm going to get to reading this, and I will catch you next time. Until next time, everybody. I do this every time. I say, I'll catch you next time, then until next time. It's very redundant.